I've spent a lot of time wondering what folks really mean when they talk about gut instincts. You hear that phrase tossed around so often. Someone gets a bad feeling about a situation, knows deep down that something isn't right, but then brushes it off like it's nothing. Thinking back now, I can see that my own gut had been yelling at me for months before the day I was supposed to get married. It was practically begging me to notice that something was off between my fiancée, Lena, and my best friend, Zane. There was a closeness between them that didn't sit right. Too familiar, too frequent, but I was overwhelmed. Work had me buried. I was grinding away at a demanding software consultancy job, juggling that with planning the wedding Lena had always dreamed of, and trying not to disappoint her very high-maintenance parents, Graham and Evelyn Barrett. Every time I felt that flicker of jealousy when I'd catch Lena and Zane laughing quietly together in a corner, or when I noticed Zane watching her a little too long, I'd push the feeling aside. I told myself I didn't have the time or energy to deal with those thoughts. I was already running on fumes, pulling 12-hour days, handling endless errands, answering constant calls, all to keep this massive wedding on track. My own parents, as loving and well-meaning as they were, didn't have the resources or experience to help with all the over-the-top plans Lena and her mom were cooking up. That left me trying to carry the weight of it all, balancing budgets, timelines, and expectations, with barely a second to breathe. But looking back, the signs were there, plain as day. One thing that stuck with me: Lena and Zane were always texting. Way more than you'd expect from a best friend and a bride-to-be. I'd noticed them sharing these quiet smiles over something on their phones or laughing about a joke they wouldn't explain. When I'd ask, "What's so funny?" I'd get vague answers. Just some meme, they'd say, or an inside joke. Stuff I wouldn't get. Always with a smile, always brushing it off. Zane and I went way back. We met freshman year of college, crammed into a tiny dorm, pulling all-nighters and covering for each other when things got rough. He was more than just a friend. He was like a brother to me. Maybe that's why I was able to ignore the red flags. I trusted him completely. He was going to be my best man. That had to mean something, right? And then there was Lena. She came from money. Old, comfortable, polished kind of money. Her parents, the Barrett, had this smug way about them. Graham was always rubbing elbows with local politicians, and Evelyn, well, she floated through galas and fundraisers like she owned them, always wearing that polite but condescending smile. When I proposed to Lena, her parents didn't object outright, but it was clear they thought she could have done better. They never came right out and said it, but they made sure I knew I was marrying into a different class. Every conversation had that undertone, that unspoken reminder that I needed to step up to meet their standards. And during the wedding planning, their true colors showed. They offered to split the costs 50-50, but then pushed for a high-end venue, ridiculous floral arrangements, live classical musicians, and a guest list that ballooned to almost 300 people. My parents, my dad, a retired schoolteacher, and my mom, who was close to retiring as a nurse, had to dip into their savings just to cover their share. I tried to set limits, to rein things in, but Lena's mom always steamrolled the conversation. "We're the Barrett," she'd say. "We don't cut corners." Or, "Do you want your bride to look cheap on her special day?" That stuff got under my skin. But Lena always took their side. She'd just laugh and say, "Let them have their fun. We're only doing this once, right?" I should have known those would be famous last words. About a week before the wedding, Zane stepped in with his usual easy confidence and said he'd take care of booking hotel rooms for the out-of-town guests. "You've got enough on your plate," he said, showing me screenshots of reservations on his phone. It felt like old times, like I could trust him with something important. I was grateful. Honestly, I needed the help. Then came the night before the wedding. Our families met for the rehearsal dinner at the grand venue Lena's parents had insisted on. Lena wore this off-white dress that was practically a bridal gown, floating around the room charming her relatives, most of whom barely acknowledged me. My folks hung around the edges of the room, clearly out of place amid all that luxury. Zane kept flashing me thumbs-ups from across the room, trying to lift the mood. After the rehearsal, we all moved to the lounge for a casual after-party. Spirits were high. Everything seemed fine, until Lena disappeared. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I asked around, and a bridesmaid said she'd felt overwhelmed and stepped out for some air. I didn't think too much of it at first. Big day tomorrow. Nerves happen. But then Zane vanished too. At first, I assumed he was just being helpful, maybe grabbing more champagne or checking on Lena. But something in my gut stirred, this quiet, urgent voice that said, "Go find them." 30 minutes passed, then an hour. I got restless and pulled out my phone, scrolling through social media, hoping for any clue. That's when I found it, Lena's Instagram. She'd accidentally posted one of those short story videos and deleted it almost immediately, but not before I caught it. In those few seconds, I saw something I couldn't unsee: a hotel hallway, unmistakable gold carpeting, and part of a room number on a door. It wasn't our venue. It wasn't even the same hotel. My chest tightened. That quiet voice I'd been ignoring for months suddenly turned into a roar. Go. Find out for yourself. I jumped in my car and started weaving through the city streets toward the Maplewood Square. My head was spinning with questions. Maybe she needed to grab something? Maybe Zane was just helping? But even as I tried to convince myself, the part of me that finally woke up refused to believe the lies anymore. I didn't know the exact hotel or the room number, but I remembered Zane had been handling bookings for guests. That gave me a lead. So I parked near one of the nicer boutique hotels and walked into the lobby, hoping someone at the desk might recognize me or the reservation under Zane's name. I didn't have much of a plan, just instinct. But then I spotted Zane's car parked near the entrance. My stomach dropped. If that wasn't a sign, I didn't know what was. I took the elevator up to the 8th floor, heart pounding, scanning every room number. For 32. For 33. Each step echoed in the hallway, the silence pressing in. The night outside the windows was pitch black, but the overhead lights felt almost too bright, like they were exposing everything I wasn't ready to face. But I wasn't looking to start a scene. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed the truth so clear that I'd never be able to lie to myself again. So I crept up to the door of room 433, leaned in close, and pressed my ear against it. At first, there was only silence. My heart was pounding in my chest as I gently tried the doorknob, and to my surprise, it turned. It wasn't deadbolt from the inside like I expected. Someone had lazily relied on the electronic lock alone. Funny enough, Zane had slipped me a master keycard a few weeks back, saying it was for wedding emergencies, in case something went sideways with the guest rooms. I had almost forgotten about it until that moment. I dug it out of my pocket, slid it into the slot, and after a beat, the little LED blinked green. The door clicked softly, signaling it had unlocked. I couldn't help but think they practically handed me the weapon to destroy them. My stomach twisted with the weight of it all. I eased the door open and stepped inside without making a sound. The room was bathed in a dim, moody glow. Soft shadows danced along the walls. I caught the sound of hushed voices, intimate, close. My blood ran hot. There, on the massive bed, was Lena, tangled up with Zane. She was lying sideways across the sheets, her hair a wild mess, her skin bare. Zane leaned over her, their bodies close, engaged in some whispery conversation I couldn't quite catch. But then she let out a little giggle, and that was more than enough. Rage surged up inside me so fast my fists clenched on their own. I wanted to storm in there, scream every curse I knew, drag Zane off that bed and make him pay. But some small, clear voice in the back of my mind told me to hold back. Don't react. Get the proof. The wedding was less than 12 hours away. I wanted them to stand there, smiling like nothing happened, thinking they'd gotten away with it, just so I could tear it all apart in front of everyone. That thought alone held me together. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone. I switched it to video mode and zoomed in on them. My thumb hovered over the record button. "You want solid proof," I reminded myself. "They need to see exactly what you saw." Eventually, I hit record. I captured several seconds, clear enough to show Lena's face, Zane's position, and even the date and time in the corner of the screen. They had no clue I was just a few feet away. Zane murmured something about how they'd never get caught, and then Lena laughed, low and easy. That was the final nail. The mic picked it up beautifully. My whole body trembled with fury, but I stayed quiet. I had to. No confrontation, not now. I repeated that to myself like a mantra, holding on to it like a lifeline. Once I had enough footage, I slowly backed out, recording the whole retreat just to be sure every humiliating second was captured. I shut the door behind me without a sound. Then I bolted. I practically sprinted down the hallway to the elevator. It felt like I had a live bomb ticking inside me, set to explode at tomorrow's wedding. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap, cold, bracing. My heart was still racing like I'd just run a race. The fury kept coming in waves, hot and consuming. I looked down at my phone, still gripped tight in my sweaty hand. That little device now held all the evidence of their betrayal. I gave myself a few minutes, trying to slow my breathing, calm down just enough to function. Then I climbed into my car and started driving. No destination, just trying to escape the burning chaos in my head. Eventually, I pulled into a 24-hour diner. I found a booth in the back, something rundown and quiet, and watched the footage again. There was no room for doubt. None. That's when a dark, ruthless plan started to take shape. If they wanted to humiliate me, well, they succeeded. But tomorrow, I'd make sure they weren't the only ones walking out of that chapel in shame. I didn't sleep that night. By 5 in the morning, I was on my third cup of coffee, scribbling notes and running through my plan like a military op. I had to time everything just right. I knew I could get control of the mic and projector. The venue had high-end AV gear for our slideshow, photos from our childhoods, our love story, all that stuff. I'd spend hours putting together a collection of sweet, slightly embarrassing pictures. Lena as a baby. Me during my awkward years. Us smiling at the beach, arm in arm. But any of that could be swapped out in seconds. I knew the system like the back of my hand. All it would take was plugging in a USB drive or connecting my phone. For a second, I hesitated. The idea of showing something so personal, so intimate, felt wrong. But then I thought about how they did it behind my back, the night before the wedding. The level of betrayal erased any hesitation. They made their choices. And now, they'd face the consequences. By 6 a.m., I headed home, our shared apartment, though it didn't feel like ours anymore. Unsurprisingly, Lena wasn't there yet. Maybe she thought I hadn't caught on. Maybe she planned to sneak in at dawn, clean herself up in the guest room, and play it off as a boozy girls' night. But when I walked in, everything was untouched. Living room dark. Bedroom spotless. I stepped into what used to be a warm, comforting space and now felt like a stranger's room. Her phone charger was still on the nightstand. The ring box I gave her was sitting on the dresser like a prop in a cruel joke. That ache in my chest flared again, but the anger was still there, keeping the pain in check. She had tossed everything we built aside for a cheap fling with my best friend. I put my phone on vibrate and tried to rest for a while, even though sleep was impossible. Around 8 a.m., I finally heard the door unlock. A soft beep. I stayed in bed, pretending to be asleep. Her footsteps were light, cautious, like she didn't want to wake me. She didn't even look into the master bedroom. I heard her slip into the guest room, probably trying to fix her appearance and come up with a story. Half an hour later, I made my entrance. I stretched, forced a fake yawn, playing the part like nothing was wrong. She was at the kitchen island, looking casual, hair brushed, comfy t-shirt and sweatpants, like nothing happened. She gave me a sleepy smile. "Morning, babe," she said. "Crashed with a friend last night. Had a little too much wine at the rehearsal dinner. You know how it is." I smiled back, calm on the outside while my mind replayed every second of that recording. "Must have been some party," I said. "Glad you're okay." Her eyes searched mine for something, relief, maybe, or fear. She was trying to figure out if I knew. I kept my face relaxed, just enough warmth to sell the act. I wanted her to believe she pulled it off. I wanted her to think she got away with it. I just needed to keep the act going a little longer. That's it. A few more hours. The wedding was set for noon at the ultra-fancy Hawthorne Ridge Estate, a place chosen for its prestige and picture-perfect elegance. My parents rolled in around 10, glowing with excitement, completely unaware that everything was about to explode. I hugged them both, though my arms felt hollow. My mom looked beautiful in her pastel dress, smiling like the day was everything we'd hoped for. My dad clapped me on the back, probably thinking back to the shy kid I used to be. I forced a smile and told them I had to double-check the AV setup. "See you soon," I said, like everything was normal. Meanwhile, Lena and her bridesmaids were upstairs, giggling and brushing blush across their cheeks, getting all dolled up in the bridal suite. Zane was probably lounging with the groomsmen. I didn't care. Let him think I was still clueless. I had no plans to talk to him, not now, not ever. Instead, I slipped away into the AV control booth, which had a clear view of the ballroom from the second floor. Inside, Jared, the tech guy, was fine-tuning the sound system and projector. He glanced up and said to a coworker, "This is the groom, Ethan. He's got a little something extra he wants to show, right?" "Yeah," I said with an easy grin, pulling a flash drive out of my jacket. "Got a special video I want to run. A bit more dramatic than the usual slideshow." Jared chuckled, clearly amused. "Hey, it's your day, man. Just give me the word when you want it queued up." I tapped the drive with my thumb. "I'll say something like, 'Roll it.' Trust me, you'll know." A flicker of guilt tried to surface, but I shoved it down. I reminded myself, they made this mess. I was just holding up a mirror. The ceremony was set for noon in the estate's grand ballroom, a space so decked out it looked like a movie set. High vaulted ceilings, glimmering chandeliers, and perfectly lined rows of white chairs filled the room. By 10:50, almost every seat was taken. Guests chatted cheerfully, posed for selfies, swapped compliments on outfits. Lena's side had shown up in full force, members of the social elite, business partners, well-dressed relatives. My crowd was smaller, close friends, co-workers, family. Not as flashy, but they mattered more to me. According to tradition, I was supposed to be waiting up at the altar with the officiant while the rest of the wedding party filed in. But at 10:55, I was nowhere to be found. The officiant, a buddy of Graham Barrett, kept glancing around like someone had forgotten to cue me. Lena's dad checked his watch, irritation rising. My mom shifted in her seat, worried. Evelyn Barrett, wrapped up tight in a lilac suit, leaned over to someone and hissed, "Where is Ethan?" Always so unreliable. She never missed a chance to take a jab at me. Lena, tucked away in some back room, was probably losing her mind, but I wasn't there to see the panic in her eyes. Instead, I was watching it all unfold from behind the curtains on the balcony above. I scanned the crowd, reading the energy, waiting for just the right moment. When the clock struck 11:01, the doors should have swung open for the bridal procession. They didn't. Instead, the crowd buzzed with confusion. Quiet murmurs turned into whispers. Guests leaned in, glancing at each other. Just the kind of tension I was counting on. Time to set it off. I slipped back into the booth. Jared looked up, clearly anxious. "We're like 2 minutes behind. You okay?" "More than okay," I said, voice steady, giving him a sharp smile. My heart was going wild, pounding against my ribs like it wanted out, but adrenaline had taken the wheel. I stepped to the mic, flipped the switch, and let my voice carry out across the grand ballroom. "Good afternoon, everyone." A ripple of silence spread instantly. Heads turned. People expected to see me appear up front in a tux, smiling like a man about to say, "I do." But there was no groom at the altar. Just a voice echoing from somewhere unseen. Confusion set in fast. Lena's dad rose halfway out of his chair. Her mom touched a hand to her chest, already nervous. The officiant looked around, bewildered. "Hello?" he asked aloud. "I want to thank you all for being here today," I continued calmly, though inside, I was barely holding together. "We're going to be making a slight change to the day's program. Actually, there won't be a ceremony." A chorus of gasps swept through the room like a gust of wind. People began shifting in their seats, twisting around, trying to figure out where my voice was coming from. Some stood up, scanning the sound booth, the balcony. Meanwhile, Lena was probably panicking in the bridal suite, dress half-zipped, heart racing. Jared turned to me, wide-eyed. I gave him the nod. He slid the flash drive in and waited. "Before you all start asking questions," I said, "I've got something to show you. Just a short video." I looked at Jared. "Roll it." The screen, which had been looping sweet, preloaded memories of me and Lena, smiling on beaches, laughing under fairy lights, went black. For a moment, there was nothing. Then came the footage. Raw. Unmistakable. Lena. Zane. Twisted up in my bedsheets. Voices low but audible. The timestamp blinking clearly in the corner. Just hours before this very day. I'd cropped the video perfectly to catch Zane turning his face toward the lens, though he never saw me. I'd zoomed just enough to make sure the clock behind them was readable. No excuses. No questions. The reaction was immediate. Aunt Ruth actually screamed, "Oh dear Lord." Someone else gasped so loud I could hear it through the booth window. Graham nearly toppled backward in his chair. Evelyn's mouth twisted like she'd just bit into a lemon soaked in battery acid. Chaos spread like wildfire. Some folks froze in horror, others clutched at each other, murmuring frantically. You could feel the wave of realization hit the room like a sledgehammer. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a prank. It was the real thing. Somewhere down below, someone yelled, "Turn it off." But I let it run a few more seconds, just long enough. 10, maybe. Enough time to etch every detail into their minds. Then I cut the feed. The projector screen faded back to black, but the mayhem in the ballroom didn't fade with it. Screams, whispers, panicked movements. Jared stared at me, stunned pale. "What the hell, man?" he muttered. I didn't answer. I was already stepping back from the mic. Down on the floor, I saw her. Lena had finally shown up at the entrance, wedding dress flowing around her, makeup perfect, but her face, it was crumpling. Her panic was all over her. Her perfect day was over before it began. "Turn it off," she screamed, her voice sharp with panic. She must have missed the actual footage by just a few seconds, but the stunned faces around her gave away more than enough. Evelyn rushed straight to the projector, stabbing her finger toward the staff like they were criminals. "Who let this happen?" she barked. Up in the booth, Jared was practically curled into himself, too terrified to answer. That's when Graham Barrett barreled down the center aisle, looking like a bull in full charge. "Where's Ethan? Where the hell is he?" he shouted, spinning in frantic circles, his face blotchy and red. The guest scrambled to get out of his path, unsure whether to freeze or make a run for it. My mom was crying, tears streaking her cheeks. Dad stood right next to her, practically shielding her with his body, eyes narrowed at the Barrett like he was trying to piece together what on earth just happened. A few of Lena's relatives looked like they wanted to vanish into their chairs, already worried the scandal might rub off on them. A woman sitting in the second row actually fainted, and the person beside her was shaking her and yelling for water. It was total chaos. Lena's eyes swept the crowd, searching every face, panic setting in. Her wedding gown trailed behind her like some tragic shadow. Then her gaze locked on me, standing up on the second-floor balcony. I stepped into view, resting my hands on the railing as I looked down. The whole crowd followed her line of sight and landed on me, like I was some deranged ringleader at a circus nobody paid to attend. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, her voice splintering with fury. "You're not supposed to see me before the wedding, you coward." Of all things to yell, that's what she went with. And honestly, I got a sick kind of satisfaction from it. Even with everything falling apart, she clung to some outdated superstition like it mattered. "There's not going to be a wedding," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You made sure of that last night." She froze like I'd slapped her, eyes brimming with tears. "Ethan, please. We can talk, just not here, not in front of all these people." "Why the hell not?" I snapped. "You didn't seem to mind sleeping with my best friend. I figure the folks who spent all this time and money getting here deserve to know why this party's over." Her mother looked like she was about to explode, red-faced and furious. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You've disgraced the Barrett name in front of all these important people. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" I let out a laugh, short and bitter. "Humiliating? That's rich. Lena and Zane humiliated me. I'm just evening the score." Suddenly, there was a commotion near the front of the room. And there he was, Zane, half-dressed in his tux, hair a mess, and panic written all over his face. "Ethan, man, let's talk about this," he said, trying to get closer to the dais. I didn't wait. I charged down the stairs, into the crowd. Lena scrambled to block me, that big white dress of hers slowing her down. I shoved right past her and headed straight for Zane. I was shaking with rage. My fists were clenched so tight they throbbed. Zane's voice cracked as he tried to explain. It wasn't like that, man. You don't understand." She was upset. I couldn't hear another word. Those images of them together, caught on my phone the night before, played in my head like a nightmare on repeat. A wave of pure fury ripped through me, and I slapped him hard. The sound cracked through the silent room like a whip. Zane stumbled, then dropped to the floor with a groan. The whole crowd gasped in unison. Lena screamed, "Stop. You're hurting him." She dropped to her knees next to Zane, not even caring that her dress was getting crushed beneath her. Evelyn let out this awful, strangled cry. "You animal! You just assaulted him in front of everyone." I pointed straight at Zane, still struggling to get up. "He's the real animal, him and your daughter. They played me for a fool, right under my nose. Now everyone knows exactly who they are." The room went dead quiet. You could hear people breathing. Lena stared at me, tears streaking her face. "Ethan, I'm sorry, okay? Just, please, stop." I turned to the guests. A bunch of them had their phones out, recording every second. I raised my voice, putting on a show for the cameras. "Thanks for showing up, everybody," I said, sarcasm dripping from every word. "But there won't be a wedding today. Hope you weren't expecting a fairy tale, just the truth." With that, I turned on my heel and shoved open the heavy double doors, leaving the chaos behind. My parents followed me out, still trying to process what just happened. Lena screamed my name behind me, but I didn't look back. By the time we got to the apartment, my adrenaline was still going full throttle. Mom was beside herself, her hands shaking, eyes full of tears. "Ethan, are you sure?" she asked gently once we were inside. "Was all of that real?" I nodded and pulled out my phone. Showed her the original video, time-stamped and everything. Her face crumpled. "Oh God," she whispered, wrapping her arms around me. I'm so sorry. Dad stood nearby, quiet but firm. He placed a hand on my shoulder. You did what you had to do, son. We lost a lot of money today, but I'd rather lose money than see you trapped in a lie. I thanked them both and told them to get some rest. They left eventually, after repeating how much they loved me, no matter what. Still, a part of me felt this ache, guilt, I guess, for how public and brutal the whole thing had been. My parents had worked so hard to give me that day, and instead, they got a disaster. But I didn't know any other way to get closure. Quietly canceling it wouldn't have been enough. I needed the truth out there. Later that night, I started packing up Lena's stuff, one box at a time. Her clothes, her endless pile of shoes, her makeup, her trinkets and throw pillows. Everything she insisted we needed. I labeled the boxes with thick black marker, stacked them neatly, and rented a U-Haul. It was close to midnight when I loaded it all in and drove to her parents' estate, this ridiculous mansion tucked inside a gated community, practically dripping in fake class. The security guard recognized me and gave me a wary look when he saw the trailer. "Everything all right, Mr. Morris?" he asked. "Just dropping off Lena's things," I said, calm and steady. He opened the gate without another word. I parked right in front of their giant front door, framed by towering stone columns and some absurdly fancy woodwork. I still had some anger bubbling under the surface, but mostly, I felt weirdly calm, like I was finally letting go. I stacked the boxes by the door, knocked once, loud and final, and walked away without looking back. As I walked away, I noticed a light flicker on inside the house. Probably Graham or Evelyn, trying to figure out who had the nerve to show up at 1 a.m. Let them discover the little surprise I left, all their precious daughter's things. Honestly, she could move back into her childhood bedroom for all I cared. The next morning, I was jolted awake by someone pounding on my apartment door like they meant to break it down. For a groggy second, I thought maybe it was part of a dream. Then I heard a voice I knew all too well, Graham Barrett. "Open the door. We know you're in there." I threw on a t-shirt and swung the door open. There they were, Lena, Graham, and Evelyn, all standing in the hallway like a storm cloud rolled in with them. Lena looked a mess, eyes swollen and red, hair sticking out in every direction. Graham, tall and stiff in some expensive suit, had his fists clenched at his sides. Evelyn wore a fancy coat and clutched a stack of papers like they were holy scripture. "We need to discuss compensation," Graham said, his tone colder than ice. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Compensation? For what exactly?" Evelyn shoved the papers into my chest. "The wedding disaster, obviously," she snapped. "We poured tens of thousands into that day, hotel rooms, catering, non-refundable bookings. Your little performance blew it all up." I glanced at the stack of itemized receipts. "You do realize your daughter slept with Zane the night before the wedding, right? If anything, they're the ones who ruined it." Lena's face twisted with outrage. "You had no right to humiliate me in front of everyone like that. If you didn't want to go through with it, you could have just called it off quietly." I could feel my temper rising again. "I had every right," I said through clenched teeth. "You and Zane embarrassed me in the worst way possible." I returned the favor. Graham's voice rose, sharp with anger. "You think there wouldn't be consequences? We paid for half that wedding. Your folks paid the rest." He stepped closer, towering over me. "But the final costs were way above what they chipped in. We want our money back. You owe us. Let's say 15,000, Evelyn chimed in, almost smug. "That doesn't even cover everything." I stared at them, stunned. "You seriously think I owe you 15 grand? For a wedding your daughter blew up?" Evelyn's lips curled in disgust. "You humiliated us in front of important people. Clients, donors, city officials. And that disgusting stunt with the projector? Unforgivable. People like us can't just walk away from that without some kind of restitution." The audacity made me want to laugh. "Let's not forget," I said. "None of this would have happened if Lena hadn't hooked up with someone else the night before our wedding." Lena flinched. "You're such a jerk," she said. "Maybe if you'd been more present. Maybe if you actually cared about my needs." I cut her off with a sarcastic snort. "Oh, so now it's my fault? You know what, save it. I'm not giving you a cent. You can all leave." Graham leaned in, trying to intimidate me. "Do you know who you're messing with? I have influence in this town." "Yeah, I've heard," I replied, unfazed. "But you seem to forget, I have a video of your daughter with a timestamp. If you want to play hardball, we'll let everyone see the footage again. Let the public decide who's actually been humiliated." Graham's fury deepened, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes. Lena took a different route, stepping forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "Ethan, please. We loved each other once. We had a life together. Don't throw it all away over one mistake. One mistake. I repeated, my voice cracking. This wasn't some slip-up. You made a choice. I saw it with my own eyes. I recorded it. There's no pretending it didn't happen. Now leave. Graham's posture slumped slightly. He realized he had no power here. Sure, they could try to make threats, but the truth was on my side. Evelyn gave one of those snobby little scoffs. You'll regret this, she warned. I shrugged. Not half as much as I would have regretted marrying into your family. They stormed off, and the door slammed behind them so hard it rattled the frame. I leaned my head back against the door, feeling a mix of exhaustion and strange relief. It was over. No wedding. No fiancé. No best friend. A hollow kind of victory, but it still felt like I'd escaped something worse. Word traveled quickly. Some friends reached out with support. Others were just curious or judgmental. I told the same story again and again on how I found out, why I did what I did. Some people said it was savage. Others called it legendary. I ignored the critics. Zane sent me a text once. Dude, I'm sorry. You gotta understand. I never responded. He lost his job not long after, something about dishonesty. Can't say I was surprised. Felt like justice. My parents were heartbroken over the money, sure. But they were also relieved I didn't end up in a marriage built on lies. My dad told my mom, better to lose some cash than for Ethan to lose his self-respect. I promised I'd pay them back. The Barrett family scrambled to fix their image, spinning tales about my meltdown and supposed jealousy. But most of the guests knew what really happened. Their reputation was trashed. Lena's especially. She bounced around between friends, maybe even ended up back with Zane. I didn't bother to check. I moved into a smaller place, threw myself into work, and started slowly picking up the pieces. The heartbreak didn't vanish overnight, but the anger kept me moving. Eventually, people stopped talking. The scandal faded into the background. Still, I kept a copy of that hotel video, just in case anyone ever tried to rewrite history. Dear viewer, thank you for your invaluable viewing. We will be very grateful for your likes, subscriptions, comments, and sharing our story. See you soon.